What founders can learn from the failed Trump-Musk partnership. Next on An Acquired Taste. In case you've been living in a cave over the last couple of weeks, the Elon Musk, Donald Trump, somewhat unlikely, somewhat cringy partnership kind of imploded in spectacular fashion. It was messy and ultimately included threats of government contract cancellations and even unmasking of a DOJ investigation. It was wild and expansive and explosive all at the same time. Ugly is probably the best way to describe it. But make no mistake, this was a business partnership. It was just kind of masked as political allegiance. Musk had quite a lot to gain from the access that Donald Trump gave him. Donald Trump had much to gain from Elon Musk, both in political contributions as well as influence and credibility within the technology sectors of the world, and certainly the technology bros of the United States. And they probably had a lot to lose during this bad breakup. This made me think about how important business partnerships are for founders of startups and small businesses. In fact, I'd argue it's the cornerstone of any successful growing business. And if you stop and think about it, business partnerships are pretty much the point of the whole damn thing, whether that's about co-founder partnerships, if it's vendor partnerships, customer partnerships, collaborative partnerships with other brands or even other companies, not to mention the implied partnership of employer-employee. And if you do believe the well-worn idiom of if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Partnerships are extremely important. Just wanted to say thanks. We recently hit 100 subscribers, and that's a big deal to me. May not be a big deal in the world of YouTube, but it certainly means a lot to me that you would subscribe to the channel. If you're not subscribed to the channel, help us reach our next goal of 200 subscribers by subscribing today. There have been a lot of these that have failed in spectacular fashion. I'm not picking on Donald Trump or Elon Musk. We've had plenty of these corporate partnerships, very high-profile corporate partnerships, kind of die a spectacular death as well. I'll give you a few examples. AOL and Time Warner. So the merger of AOL and Time Warner is often referred to as the most disastrous business combination in history. There were cultural clashes, and then on top of it, everything else, there was kind of the dot-com bomb or dot-com slump that hit everybody simultaneously right after that merger took place. The Facebook dispute between Eduardo Saverin and Mark Zuckerberg, very much well memorialized in The Social Network on the movie The Social Network. And it really came down to what Mark thought Facebook should be, what Eduardo thought Facebook should be, and what role each one of them was going to play in it. Ultimately, Eduardo famously got pushed out of the company with a fraction of the ownership shares that he once had, or at least had claim to. Kraft and Starbucks. So Kraft actually distributed Starbucks bagged coffee in retail locations. And then there were just these disputes over marketing, the distribution channels, how big, where. Starbucks ultimately accused Kraft of failing to promote its products. And Kraft said that Starbucks tried to end the agreement unilaterally. Ultimately, Starbucks had to pay Kraft $2.75 billion. So $2.75 billion. Let's just call it $3 billion for rounding sake in damages. Daimler and Chrysler, if any of you are over the age of 35 or 40, you can remember when Daimler, which was the parent company of Mercedes-Benz, and Chrysler merged. It made no sense to anyone at the time, continued to make no sense. Ultimately, it was a failure. By 2001, Chrysler was losing $3 billion annually. Isn't that about $3 billion? It's like a theme in these failures. But anyway, Time Warner actually could have made this list twice with its merger with AT&T. It was basically unwound 4 years after it was consummated, and it took them, I think, like 4 or 5 years to even get the deal past the regulators. And AT&T effectively sold Warner Media to Discovery. And just this week, Warner and Discovery announced that they were splitting the company into 2 separate entities. So kids, the moral of the story is don't go into broadcast media. Begs the question of why do these partnerships fail? And it might surprise you, but they're for really basic and predictable reasons. I did a little bit of research and found from a number of different sources, including a company called Pollock Peace Building, Navix Consulting, and a few others. And the themes were consistent, is the best way to put that. Let's just start at the top. Communication breakdowns between the partners. So that could mean ineffective or infrequent communications. They're just not talking that often, or they're not talking about the right things. You're avoiding difficult conversations to have. Maybe something's not going well, but you just kind of sweep it under the rug. And then that happens again and again and again. And you start to build up this resentment about how this partnership somehow feels unequal or unfair to one or more of the people involved. A basic mismatch of goals and values, visions for what you want to have at the company. You have partners that may start with aligned intentions. Hey, this is where we're going. This is what we're doing. But then they get into actually doing it, and they start to understand that each one of them wants something different out of this. You could have a partner that wants to grow rapidly. You have another partner that wants to grow profitably, just in the idea of 2 co-founders with differing visions. And now what does the company do? It's stuck in the middle. It's almost like pending divorce, and the company is the child that now has to figure out how to navigate shared custody. There can be feelings of unequal contributions or efforts. I'll go back to the Facebook example. Mark didn't think Eduardo was working hard enough. Mark didn't think Eduardo was spending enough time on the business. Eduardo thought that he was spending the time that he was spending in the right ways, in ways that Mark couldn't or wouldn't do. It ultimately came to a head. Eduardo got pushed out. But these feelings and a disparity of the amount of time or the effort or what somebody's focusing on can create this imbalance or this feeling of imbalance or unfairness. If one partner consistently contributes more, they may feel undervalued because they're looking at their partner going, when are you going to step up? When do I get to stop doing everything, or at least having the perception of doing everything? Financial disputes are one that I see often. I've navigated them myself. So it can be something that creates tension throughout on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, annual basis. It could be about how the profits are distributed, what we're spending money on, how frequently we're spending money on it. Is that a good use of time? What somebody else in the company is making, what their compensation looks like. The lack of transparency or the lack of consensus around how that money should be utilized or what should be done with that money or distributed back to the partnership. That can erode trust on a really fundamental level, and that's hard to recover from. The last one is loss of interest or commitment. This is usually demonstrated when one of 2 partners or one party starts to lose interest in the partnership in general, or the work that the partnership represents, whether that's in a services firm, whether that's in some sort of product distribution, co-branding effort, whatever the case may be. Somebody has stopped being interested in moving forward with that, while the other one's still very much interested in moving forward on that. Those misalignment of goals, that loss of interest, that loss of commitment can basically end these partnerships. So doing the research for this episode and finding citations about all of these bad partnerships and how they went poorly and what that meant ultimately for the company, you start getting down to the root causes, and you start to realize that not only is this very predictable, but it's very solvable, and it's solvable in some incredibly simple ways, like aligning those visions. Talked about the misalignment of vision or values or goals for the company or for that partnership, the work that partnership represents. Feels like it's something you can lay out very early and come to some sort of consensus where one of two things is going to happen. You're going to find that you are ultimately aligned or that you are ultimately misaligned. And if you're misaligned to the point that's unrecoverable, maybe this partnership shouldn't get started in the first place. Defining the roles, the responsibilities, and the decision-making process within that partnership on the front end can be very helpful. How are we making decisions? What happens when we disagree? What happens when one partner wants to do one thing or one partner has a benefit that the other partner can't recognize? How do we resolve that? And how do we resolve that from a process standpoint so that when it actually happens, we know what we need to do and we've already agreed to how we're going to resolve that? The importance of communication and transparency and frequency around communication can be established, again, very early on. How often are we going to meet? What are we going to talk about? What's the agenda look like? Are we going to be honest with each other? Am I going to speak up when I think something has gone off the tracks? Am I going to take the time to have uncomfortable conversations or conversations that I'm not sure my partner is going to react well to? Can I lay that out on the front end? Can we talk about those things and how we're going to navigate that when they happen, because they will happen on the front end, so that we're not surprised and that we're not stuck avoiding those conversations that we need to have. Laying out the equity, financial agreements, distribution of profits, how we're going to run that, how we're going to analyze that, kind of the rules of the road, what we're going to do, what we're not going to do. Establish that before you actually make any money or before you start seeing revenue generated from this partnership. How will it be distributed? Who gets what? When do they get it? How do we make decisions around those things? All of that goes back to aligning on those vision, values, and goals and prioritizing the communication around how are we making decisions. If you're doing those things, you're effectively planning for conflict. And if you plan for conflict, the belief is that the depth of that conflict will be significantly more shallow and significantly more navigable. That will in turn, over time, build trust, mutual respect. And if you are consistently acting within those guidelines, within those established parameters, within your decision-making process that you set out at the very beginning, your partnership is going to continue to foster and build upon that trust and that mutual respect. And having navigated a lot of these in my professional life, and frankly speaking, navigating some of them poorly, I really can say that most of this is predictable and therefore can be planned for. You have the opportunity to understand what's in front of you and plan for it today before it happens, so that when it does happen, you know exactly what you're going to do. And more importantly, your partners know exactly what you're going to do, because they're going to do exactly the same thing if you are being disciplined and sticking to what you said you were going to do. Again, in that environment of trust and mutual respect. Taking some time to have open, honest, and potentially difficult conversations with your business partners, especially your co-founders and co-owners if you're in a business with other people that have ownership interest in that company. Have those conversations early, and that partnership can establish an incredibly meaningful, durable, and repeatable foundation where everybody knows what to expect. There are fewer surprises, and you've planned for what will inevitably happen, which is conflict that needs to be resolved. And you've already set the roadmap for how that's going to work. After all, no one wants to end up like Mark and Eduardo at Facebook, except for maybe the billionaire part, which sounds pretty okay to me. Well, that's the episode. Thanks for checking it out. As always, like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time.